Good evening, and thank you for coming to the Writers Institute faculty opening reading. I'm just going to get us started. We're going to jump right into this, and I'm going to read a poem by Kelsey Ray, who is coming to SU in October, so I'm hoping that you'll get really excited for their visit. The poem is called Moving Mind. My mind will not lie still. It is a mare before the rainfall, a cow before the slaughter. It knows the storm is coming to sever its beating heart, and all it wants is the hush of rain to pass over and wash the noise away so it can finally rest. So Kelsey Ray. You don't need to clap for me, but when Kelsey Ray comes, absolutely. It's a tradition to start our semesters like this with an opening reading, and tonight you get to hear 7 of the creative writing faculty members in our Department of English and Creative Writing. If this is your first time at a reading, welcome. My advice is that you open your heart and mind, that you listen. You may hear something that will spark something in you that you hadn't expected to find today. We'll hear first from our newest faculty members, and we'll start with Apoorva Bradshaw-Mittal, a short story writer and essayist who holds a PhD in creative writing from the University of Southern Mississippi. They hold a BTech in software engineering from Delhi Technological University and an MFA in creative writing from Sarah Lawrence College. And then we'll move on to Sean Ironman, also here new this year. Sean is an essayist and cartoonist who holds a PhD in English with an emphasis in creative nonfiction from the University of Missouri-Columbia, and an MFA in creative writing with an emphasis in creative nonfiction from the University of Central Florida. Then you'll be treated to a reading by Monica Prince, a wonderful writer specializing in choreographed poems and performance poetry. Silas Zobal, novelist and short story writer, and too busy co-chair of our department. Myself, Catherine Dent, director of the Writers Institute and a fiction writer. Glen, Retief, memoirist, travel writer, and investigative journalist. And Karla, Kelsey, poet, essayist, novelist, and scholar, among many other wondrous things. So let's get it started by welcoming Apoorva Bradshaw-Mittal.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Hi, everyone. The auditorium is full, so thank you for this warm welcome. It's a privilege to be here. I am Apoorva Bradshaw-Mittal. I'm a visiting professor here at the Writers Institute. I teach fiction, I write fiction. Following the theme of fiction, I'm actually teaching 2 workshops here this semester, and I'm also teaching a class on the form of the short story. I'm working on a novel and a novella. Novella is the more recent of the projects, and the novel is I've been working on it for 4 years now, and so it's close to being done as it could be before it's sent out to people who sort of know what to publish and what not to publish. It's titled Couplings because the characters are all in search of that other person, the other one that they can spend their life with, whether it be a friend, a romantic partner, somebody they can share their emotions, laughs, whatever you feel in your life. The excerpt today is from that novel in which the narrator is again trying to find, or maybe accidentally finds, that one other person. It's going to be a short reading, so yeah, here it goes. At the cafe, bookstore, record store, people recognized me. I've never belonged anywhere really, but as I walk in, Gus behind the records counter smiles and says, "Ritu, me too. My name is Ritu, but he is supposed to be American, and so I don't mind." All the servers knew my order already. A large iced coffee with 25% oat milk and 75% brew, and sugar-free hazelnut. After spending an hour nursing my coffee and writing into my moleskin journal, I order a veggie sandwich or a strawberry salad. The hours I've spent here reading and writing avoiding my house, have built up a cachet. Being seen by all these people makes me heady. I see myself through the other patron's eyes. The mysterious stranger. She's wearing a cool shirt. She's reading that book that everyone loves but nobody has actually read. Should I tell her that I love that book? I should ask her, where can I plug in my laptop? I smile and politely point to all the outlets in the walls. I also let them in on the secret. The sockets by the windows don't work. They ask, none of them? And I say, yeah, none. It must be the rainwater seeping in. I come to the cafe 3 days a week. I get here sometimes at 10, sometimes even 9. I work here till 4. The food at the cafe has been making me sick lately, so after my second meal here, I rush to my home a few meters from the cafe and sit on the toilet for up to an hour, expelling all that my body can't keep inside. I continue to come to the cafe and eat here. This is the source of my creative energy, and then if I'm here, I must eat their food. I can't be here occupying their tables, their real estate, and then not give them my business. In my bedroom, I bend my body in ungainly ways. I look ugly with all the folds spilling out and all my mass jiggling as I do jumping jacks. I breathe deeper and deeper until everything seems so empty that I buy another bookshelf or another rug or another floor lamp online. None of these stay for long in my room and eventually make their way into the basement, which is locally called the hall. The movement is perpetual. Nothing seems new anymore. In my living room hang pictures of my dead parents and husband, an homage to all the people I've loved and lost. A woman sits on the sofa. She's come to inquire about the hall, if she could rent it from me as a work studio. You see, she makes these soft toys inspired by folklore and mythology. Ram, Sita, and Hanuman are teddy bears in bright orange dhotis and sari. All the figures have eyes shaped like almonds and lips curved to the left as if their embroidered features hold all the knowledge of the world. I do not like their smugness. I'm not looking to sublet this space, but prospective renters have shown up at our doorstep ever since I was a child, asking if the shop was available to let. My parents never corrected the inquirers. Instead, they also began calling the hall a shop and asked prospective renters to check back in a few months. They thought it was a good idea to keep the people wanting. That way, the price of their coveted property would never go down. I tell the woman sitting on my sofa that I've planned to use this space as my writing studio, and she smiles politely. I offer her tea, and when she refuses the offer, I'm disappointed. Where could I buy some of your toys? I ask her. And she brings out more of those dolls, no taller than 8 inches. Radha, Urmila, and Krishan, Leela but no Majnu, Jai Viru. I fondle the duo from Sholay, and they burst into, Ye dosti hum nahi todenge. She cringes as the music from a cheap battery system erupts out of the chest of the 70s characters who could arguably be the best iconic gay couple ever shown in Bollywood. In the movie, of course, they are best friends, singing about how their friendship would never die. The idea of adding this music doesn't seem to be hers, the woman's who is so young, maybe in her early 20s. She says she makes all the toys on her own. Do you have a business plan? I ask her, and she pulls out a notebook with figures and details about all the sales and profits. She has a website through which she gets about 1,000 monthly orders, and her projected manual profit for her first year is 5 lakhs. Her father has invested all his savings in her business, and the last of the investment will help pay for the workspace, which she intends to expand into a brick-and-mortar store. Where do you work now? I live with my parents and 2 sisters, and our 2-bedroom apartment is filled with my work material. The baby Ganesh is actually cute, and now that I've looked at these toys long enough, they're growing on me. But I'm sorry, I say. I cannot help you. I get up from the sofa. She collects the toys and thanks me. As she's about to leave, I stop her to ask her name. Sakshi, she says, and then leaves. In the kitchen, the tea storm brews on the stovetop as I stand looking over it. I imagined the girl who makes soft toys living with me in my house, and since she does not, and the tea is not to be drunk by her, I let it boil over and spill onto the stove plates and the countertop. I imagined that the tea would fester between the cracks, grow mold, make me sick. In front of the mirror, the edges of my skin spill over no matter how hard I pull them up with my hands. If I were ever to go under knife, I would ask them to begin with my throat, then to make their way down, cutting my breasts, waist, thighs, dive deeper into my stomach, my bladder, my intestines. The rot of the mold would be inside me, digging its roots. They would find that it was always me, this rot, not the spoiled milk of the tea that brewed at some point in the past in my house, in my kitchen. I give Sakshi a call. I tell her that I've changed my mind, and the sooner she can move into the studio space, the better. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I recognize so many of my own students, which is quite nice. If you don't like this, though, my students, I still have stuff to offer you through the semester, so don't place too much judgment. I'm Sean. I'm an essayist and a cartoonist. I'm here teaching fiction and nonfiction and a literature class called Living Writers, which I'm enjoying, which is at this time, usually. I'm so happy to see all of you have come here instead of our classroom. You've remembered. I am currently working on a memoir titled As Many Roast Bones as You Need. I have been working on it for far longer than I'll admit. It's kind of embarrassing. I'm actually going to be, it's a memoir about caretaking and about this time, kind of when I was around your age, right after college, taking care of my parents and a dog and a girlfriend at the time, everyone going through stuff, and it's kind of how all these relationships interconnect and bounce off one another and kind of complicate our understanding of what it means to care for other people and what it means to care for ourselves. I'm going to be reading from a chapter that's a work in progress. The chapter is titled Outside the Streets on Fire. It's the second chapter. It's told in 9 parts. I will not put you through 9 parts. I'm going to be reading just the first half of the 4th part. And I think the only thing you have to know is that just spent the day moving my mom out of her house. Okay. We cannot bring ourselves to say a loved one died. We say they left us, that they went to a better place. We say they were called home. 9,000 years ago, the dead truly did go home. In what is now Turkey, the people of Çatalhöyük buried the dead under their floorboards, often directly below where they slept. Corpses were likely first placed atop the 26-acre honeycomb of windowless mud brick houses for griffin vultures to gorge on meat, muscles, organs. The remains were then carried down a ladder into a home that had vulture skulls encased in walls painted with monstrous birds devouring headless bodies. All their lives, the living cooked and napped and made love inside their mausoleum, unable to look away from what would ultimately tear them apart. My mother cannot bring herself to do anything but look away. She stands anchored behind her driver's side door, gaze fixed on the gravel at her feet. Finally, she speaks, says, "Might as well take what you want," but refuses to lift her head, to risk glimpsing what was once home. Those vultures are just going to tear it apart. I turn toward the house, but her car door slams shut, and in the second or two it takes to turn back around, she is already reversed out of the driveway. She is gone before I even think through what she meant. Before I realize we spent half the day gutting the place, yet the only mark we seemingly made is opening the front door. Her bench still rots on the porch. The tangled hose still snakes around trash cans strewn near the dirt. My father's aquariums, laden with rusted wrenches, brittle newspaper, and skeletons of trapped anoles, still lie in the middle of the carport, stacked at odd angles, the final moments of a Jenga tower. Her new apartment holds only so much, and just as she does not have it in her to deal with realtors and open houses, all for a house worth less than the mortgage, she does not have it in her to hold a yard sale or use Craigslist. What if they robbed me? I'm a single woman now. Maybe if you came home, but it's not safe. The bank will sell what it can, trash what it cannot. Part of me, nearly all of me, believes this is what my mother wants, for the vultures to tear into all we gathered, all we built, if only so she may hate my father even more. The breeze dies, the world quiets, and perhaps it is this quietude, this caesura, or perhaps it is the ease of entering, the abnormality of not needing to climb over the baby gate that once corralled my mother's Pomeranians, which compels dread to take root. The same dread I felt that night outside the fort in St. Augustine, the night the tour guide said to listen to waves crash, listen for the moans of Spanish conquistadors' forever anguish, their final resting place was so far from home. I do not dare flip a light switch, do not dare reveal my presence to whatever phantoms might lurk, and even though I cannot think of a single item I must now rescue from the bank's talons, I creep deeper and deeper into the tomb, past the living room couch, the matching armchair and ottoman, furniture meant for company that never came, furniture now blanketed in thick clumps of dog hair, past the dining table and the curio cabinet that harbors dusty precious moments figurines, harbors scenes of a devoted porcelain husband and wife, the fate, I suppose, my mother hoped would be hers, past Carrie's room, Bible quotes taped to her white rattan dresser, comforter taut across bed, pillows fluffed and waiting, and even past the room I shared with Timmy, sports trophies lining our dresser, figurines warped and amputated, medals coiled like serpents. Only once I reach my parents' room do I find a house no longer poised for our return, no longer concerned with the facade of our significance. Dust, like chalk at the scene of a murder, outlines the now departed bed and dresser. Capsized snow globes and crumpled letters demanding payment litter the tile, and flayed of blouses and purses, my mother's treadmill sits as a cadaver left to rot. The lone sign of life in this God-forsaken room is my father's closet, which teems with all he possessed, nearly all he possessed. Barren hangers bisect his abandoned apparel, sever one group of shirts from another, seemingly at random, as though he seized what he could in one fell swoop and ran off into the night. And this fissure at the heart of my father's worldly goods exposes a familiar blue spine, a spine that mesmerizes, that beckons. For the life of me, I cannot summon the words, but I know what I will unearth before I push aside his shirts, before I widen the cavity. And there, deep within my father's closet, lie cloth-bound encyclopedias, one for each letter and each year from 1971 to 1995. Books unseen, books forgotten about since those evenings in the garage of our old house when he and I lifted weights on the bench press he built me. Those evenings we sweated together, were made strong together. Back then, as I studied my breathing between sets, I stared at these books lined up on the shelf below his aquariums and believed they were the reason he knew all I ever thought there was to know about the world. To resurrect the memory of the lost, the knowledge of those who came before, the people of Chattahooyok unsealed the graves in their homes and removed bones, held them in their hands, felt the marks that a life lived in prints deep inside us, deeper than flesh. I too reach into the pit so that I may run my finger down the thick spine of an encyclopedia and feel more than cloth, so that I may feel the vinyl bench peel from my back, the grooves of the thin bar press into my palms, the stagnant, humid air coat my skin. I even taste the bitter sweat that dripped as my father towered over me, protected me from being crushed by the weight I struggled to lift so I could become like him. In time, the living returned the bones to their eternal resting place, but a hunger rouses inside me, gnaws at the innermost parts of me, a hunger for memory, for the life I once lived, the life we once lived, a hunger no mere caress of a spine can satiate, a hunger that compels me to wrest volume after volume from the undercroft, compels me to cradle an ever-growing mountain of tomes until my arms buckle and my back aches, compels me to race to the trunk of my car as though I have removed the very foundation of this house, and the walls will now come down around me. Yet each remnant of knowledge I exhume, each trip I take, leaves me only more famished, only more ravenous. And when I have finally pillaged every last blue spine my father ever collected, when I stand before a pit disgorged of anything that could possibly satisfy the swelling emptiness I feel, this hunger overwhelms me, turns me crazed, and in my delirium, I become as covetous as those conquistadors, as gluttonous as those marauders of gold. I ravage, I raze, I ransack, I tear through this would-be home as though possessed, ripping and clawing at whatever my gut seems to believe might resurrect the past, whatever might sate this craving once and for all. Thank you.
Hi, team. It's nice to see you. Thanks for being here. I'm gonna read 3 poems, and then, or 2 poems, and my fabulous husband is gonna read one of the poems, because I have a new book coming out in January called Force, and I'm super excited. But it is so inappropriate to read here, so I'm not gonna read it at all. I tried, I did my best, I couldn't do it, it's fine. So I'm gonna read from Work in Progress called Mistress in Recovery, and then my lovely husband is gonna read from my latest book, Roadmap, and then I'm gonna read from another Work in Progress, and it's gonna be exciting and super, super dope. Okay, here we go. I worry for the mahogany coffee table, witnessing you kiss me 5 minutes after claiming you were in a relationship. I worry for not enough lip gloss in my purse, too much wine in my bloodstream, missing moments in my memory. I worry for the hammock on the front porch rocking us to sleep, or the sunrise waking you first. I should, but I don't, worry for her. Between your fumbling for a button I'll pretend you found and heavy exhales about my skills, I should think of her. The books on her shelf that I've read before, her name moaned out with your hand on the back of my head, how she'll imagine me in her house, her bed, her man's dreams as you snore beside her. It's too easy to let you fall back into me, as if your drunken infidelity could replace real love. Like an empty wine bottle smashed against the opposite wall, you will never admit to cheating, only starving for attention. I worry not for her, the woman whose face brightens at your name, whose face will break into ugly shapes if you reveal this indiscretion, rather than wonder where she is tonight, since not in your arms. I worry instead for the walls with memories, couches stained with my perfume, carpets cradling imprints of my high heels. So this poem has an epigraph. It's called Black Boys Are Missing. It's a Eulipian constraint. And for those of you who don't remember what can someone tell me what a Eulipian constraint is? Logan.
Yes. A Eulipian constraint is a poem which has a constraint on the letters or words that you are allowed to use.
Correct. Made by French people. It's just a fact. So this Eulipian constraint means that every stanza represents a letter in a particular word. This particular word is suicide. Every stanza, the first stanza represents the letter S, which means there are no S's in the first stanza. Next stanza has no U's. Next stanza has no I's, and so on and so forth. But you have to use all the other letters of the alphabet, including Z, K, J, Q, etc. It's really hard to come up with a Q word that doesn't have a U in it, so marvel at my brilliance. The epigraph that it starts with is, according to the CDC, the most likely cause of death for black male children under the age of 13 is suicide.
I know a lie or two about black folk, about our likelihood to remove one another from the planet. Not by gang violence or a jury conviction, a quiet formula. We exchange without language. I know I'm not the only one with a razor locked under my bed. And yet the statistics have me believing self-harm is a whites-only phenomenon. My father carved X's into his skin. My mother dated white men in the hopes that they'd kill her. I don't want to know these secrets. Don't want to inherit this legacy of scars and reckless, find new ways to bleed down tranks instead of facing reality. They say we do this for attention. I do this for strength, for rest, for freedom. One day, I'll rejoice at my own sobriety. 0 days of self-harm and no fantasies of how to press the eject button from Earth. Oh, damn, you're uncomfortable. Of course. Once you know somebody wants to cease to be, you can't unknow. Can't quell the fact that not everyone wants to hold on to the end, get from A to Z. You expect bad days, sure, but not bad enough to end your life. To imagine waltzing into the sea, stone tied around your waist, or overdosing on vodka and pills, or jumping from a bridge into southbound lanes. That feeling of helplessness, you dismiss as a bad day. It boomerangs in my bone marrow, the double helix of DNA and generational trauma. Our parents teach fear, not pleasure, death because of our race, an unasked for burden. It will quote a phone number, offer an ear or a shoulder, just enough to soothe. All our egos then move on. Exactly so useless. We're aware of echoes of agony, desperate tweets at 0 hour, then we stay shocked at the funeral. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not even asking for help. I want recognition, realization that young black boys kill themselves, that we're more lethal, more successful at it. One moment we're in love, laughing, joking. The next, someone comes across our quieting pulse. What I'm trying to say is I'm always angry. I contain my fury with brutality against my own sparkling. It hurts. I hurt. I cry. I don't want you to know that. I know how toxic I sound, but I'm sick of lying about how much my soul burns. All this vicarious sorrow, I can't support it. And occasionally I want to quit. Go to glory, as my grandma might say. But today is a good goddamn day. Today I thwart any bait to kill this body. Today I jazz and swoon as I know what I will do soon. Thank you. Hold on. She forgot to mention that the audiobook for this book is coming out soon. And as her unofficial, not paid manager, I have to mention that. I'm not paid.
All right, so I fell for a boy this summer, and I wrote a whole book of poems about it. You know, as we do. Over Summer Writers Workshop, we did a cento. Can anyone tell me what a cento is? Cento is? You all disappoint me to great lengths. It's okay. You haven't been in Dr. Kelsey's class long enough. That's okay. Okay, so a cento/cento is a found poem where you steal lines and or phrases from already published works, and you put them in an order that makes sense into a different poem. That's the purpose of that. So this one is called Cento for the Violence of Forbidden Yearning. We argue as follows. You didn't start this, but love, conceived as acquisitive, is nothing but sexual desire. I am to blame for divulging a secret meant to stop things in advance. Now it's too late. Now, having no objective status at all, You maintain she is unable to satisfy sexual passions. She will consider any evidence to prove her very person as a work of art. For me, I resist. Part ghost, part child, part young girl, part sexy woman, part mountain witch, all at once. The secret revealed, there is obviously one thing left to revolt against, which is sex itself. How else will the dour recluse of my lust remain in the shadows? You don't need to be formal. I broke through your chaos, offered all those violent altercations meant to tempt you into me. Now, relative, all sorts of amazing things will happen if you dare to expect joy in your life. You remind me, you never gave me permission to wait for you. I remind you, we accomplish more by trying to achieve less. I'm tired, you're regretful, she's oblivious. What to do with this body you refuse to embrace? When I break for a red light, will you crash into me anyway? Fire, so pretty, till the injured lie in it, right? How many ways can I say freedom is the absence of restraint, attachment breeds resentment, you can have whatever you want? This passionate drama of choosing and being chosen, failing and being rejected, yet being ultimately accepted and loved. Why is there anything at all rather than nothing? You chill the gin, pour it gracefully into a glass, never break eye contact. I am too old to be pushed and pulled. Drinking, Fitzgerald said, is the writer's vice after all. You touch your lips, remember, want me. I won't apologize. Some of us has no desire to change. I carve symbols into ice, leave cubes at your door, think of her, never. Our argument over, her blood on our hands. When used in a carefully considered manner, speech can help someone not die. You whisper in my ear, a curse. None of us survive. Thank you.
Hey, you all. I'm Silas. I'm going to read from a novel called Heartseed. I'm going to read 3 sections, and it's difficult to choose what to read from this novel because it offers a lot of different perspectives. And the easiest thing to do would be to take one perspective and read a chunk of it. But the whole novel was kind of formed because, like in the early Trump days, I was thinking about kind of the dark sides of individualism and wanting to explode the idea of the individual, kind of that I think we focus on too much, and investigate how we separate ourselves from communities and move toward communities as we define ourselves. And so I don't want to read from one perspective because it feels false to the whole project. So I'm going to read from 3 perspectives, but I only have 5 minutes. So that puts me in a little bit of a quandary. That's why I'm just blabbering up here. So the 3 perspectives are going to be from a 17-year-old named Jonas Troutman, his dad, Levi Troutman, and his mom, Susan Troutman. Jonas, the 17-year-old, his mom is dead, so it's a curious perspective when we get there. Jonas lives on a sheep farm with his dad, who also grows marijuana, trying to make ends meet. I think that's all I need to tell you before I read the first section. The line of sheep bodies curved up the hill towards the copse of white pines. Oh, I forgot to tell you something important. Jonas, he's 17, he's a farm kid, but he memorizes the scientific names for flora and fauna. So it's in here. The line of sheep bodies curved up the hill toward the copse of white pines, Pinus strobus, behind the barbed wire, slick white wool matted with blood, each neck cut clean. There was blood on Jonas's hands, but he was used to blood on his hands. Still, urgency fountained inside him, flushing limb to limb, as he left one dead ewe, Ovis Aries, and moved to the next. Fear heated his cheeks and goosebumped his arms. He couldn't imagine who could have killed the sheep like this. He couldn't think of much beyond the names of things. They were his sheep. They were his father's sheep. They were the descendants of the sheep raised by his father's father, and he had known them his whole life. He touched a ewe's woolly nape. The wind touched the wool. The sun touched the earth's bright hearth. One ewe lived, each breath loud and rasping. Odd shapes blossomed into the cool air above its mouth, and the boy, Homo sapien, would never understand how he both loved the sheep and hated them, which was not unlike the way he loved and hated his father, which was not unlike the way that he loved and hated himself. The ewe's mouth hung open, pink tongue stuck out past black lips. He touched a patch of clean wool, and a great human lonesomeness winnowed through him, and what he was welled up in his throat, part wheat and part chaff. He was Jonas Troutman, from the long line of Troutmans in Snyder County, Pennsylvania, and the ewe's last rasp settled on the grass, Dactylus glomerate, and the white clover, Tripholum repens. Jonas dug his nails into his palms to spark pain's bright ember. They were his sheep, and they were his dad's sheep. All his life, his dad had delivered slick and wavering lambs, while Jonas watched and waited breathless until they bleated and were bottle-fed and were grown. His mom, Susan Troutman, had named Jonas the moment after she'd birthed him, then held him up in the birthing room at Evangelical Hospital in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, and shouted out his name. The nurses had all laughed. Hours later, she'd hemorrhaged out and died young and left Jonas and his dad alone in Snyder County for 17 years. All right, that's the beginning of the novel, more or less. And then I jump forward to the middle of the novel. A lot has happened that I can't tell you about. One of Levi's, the father's, drug deals has gone bad. He's been shot twice. He's in the hospital. And this is the moment that he wakes up. And when he wakes up, he's really confused. Time is, he doesn't know where he is. He partly thinks he's in the hospital. He partly is remembering the past. And so you're going to be confused. At Evangelical Community Hospital, imagine, so Jonas is 17. That means Levi Troutman is, in his late 30s now, right? That makes sense? At Evangelical Community Hospital, Levi Troutman jerked awake with his skin wet. The shadows on the walls were the wisps of bad dreams. Blood welled up through his bandages, and the agony of his arm told him that he should not move. His heart beat too loud. Time slid in and out of focus as if someone were spinning a diopter ring. When he lifted his head, his vision distorted, and he lay in bed at home with his wife, shaking him awake. Her belly was huge, and she was telling him it was time to get the go bag that she'd packed with baby bottle and bathrobe and nipple cream and that stupid stuffed blue dog. And her hand on his shoulder held too tight, and his arm hurt. Everything flickered in and out because time had always been a dream, and he lay again almost dying on the floor in the front hallway of his house. The air smelled of brimstone, and Truth hunkered in the shadow against the wall, and Jonas walked away from him, stepping into a doorway filled with lights so bright that Levi couldn't see where he was going. So he closed his eyes and tried to let go. But a fire burned at his arm and his side, and he reached out. To catch his son before he was gone, or to help his wife up, or to grab the wand with the call button that summoned the nurse, or to pick up the go bag that they kept on the floor beside the bed. His hand bumped into something. He was pretty sure his eyes were open, but he was still in the dark, and the room had filled with ghosts, and bits of light kindled at the edges of the drapes over the window. The past hung in the shadows, and the present burned in the fire of his arm, and everything faded in and out. At last, his hand reaching out caught his son's shoulder, or took his wife by her hand, or pushed the nurse's call button over and over so that someone, anyone, might come. Now I'm jumping to the end of the novel, not the very end, close to the end, and it moves backward in time, 17 years, to the moment Jonas is born, and his mom's still alive. There was so much blood, but Susan Troutman had never been afraid of blood. The hospital was a pale ghost. The walls were as insubstantial as the walls of her womb, and they widened and opened and were torn by time. Her body was a portal or an electrical current. She had gone to the hospital to have a child, and the pain was a song to be sung. She'd gotten pregnant too early and married too early. Her husband, Levi, wasn't much and needed a lot of molding. The doctor in the room said things she couldn't hear, and he went outside the room and fell in love with a nurse and married and had children and died. And then he came back into the room to tell Susan that everything was progressing ordinarily. Everything was going to be okay. The nurse beside him had painted lips. Susan's middle contracted into a ball that was trying to empty itself and divide the hours in two. Susan knew it would be a boy because they'd told her so, but it didn't matter, boy or girl. She just wanted to hold them as they grew up and nurse them and burp them over her shoulder and watch where the spit milk landed. How could her body be another life's portal? She could feel it coming, and she sang her song. And the ghosts in the room told her that it would be okay, though they were always wrong. The walls were as thin as paper and translucent, and she could see the shadows behind them, and love leaked onto the white hospital sheets, and what was inside slid outside, and time split into two, and there was a child. She held him in her arms. They looked at each other, still connected by the umbilical cord, and his eyes were open, and they were still one body, and yet not one body. And she loved and hated him already, as she loved and hated herself. And she knew that this moment, like all moments, would be over so soon, and yet also last forever. Thanks.
Oh, I'm so lucky because I get to go at the beginning and now in the middle, and at the very end I'll come up and say goodbye to everybody. But I'm feeling very grateful. I'm really grateful that Sean and Apoorva have come to join us here, and I just want to see a show of hands of anybody who's in one of their classes this semester. It's like the majority of the room, so thank you so much for being here, and thank you students for coming to support your professors, and if you aren't in class with them, I hope you get to know them this year. And how many of you just came from the SU Slam? Yeah, thank you guys. I'm really grateful to all of you for making it over here. And I'm grateful to Fuse for hosting Meet the Magazines tomorrow. That's going to be really exciting. And I'm grateful to all of the people who put so much into making this department great. My colleagues who are here, and all of the students. So, and Tony Zitta, who isn't here tonight, couldn't be here even though he was supposed to read tonight, but had to miss it. But I'm really so glad that he's part of our lives. 1 year ago today, the day after Labor Day, I had a biopsy that diagnosed me eventually with cancer. And I went through that in the fall of 2024. So while lots of things were going poorly for lots of people in fall of 2024, I was also having a very dark time. And during that time, there were a lot of students. Oh, by the way, I wanted to ask one more question. Who here is a first-year student? Raise your hand. Welcome to all of you. I'm really glad you all are here too. And I think there's a lot of people in here who worked really hard to get you all here, so I'm so glad you're here too. So you don't know this story, but a lot of people in the room already do. Anyway, all of the treatments, everything was very successful. By the time January rolled around, I had finished with everything, and I just want to say that I am so grateful to my colleagues in the room who were here, who supported me through that, and the people in the community who supported me through that, so I really appreciate that. And part of that recovery was my novel writing class, which was in spring of 2025. And I see a number of those people in the room, and they encouraged me by their amazing efforts and just by their generosity and human spirit to start working again on a novel that I have been working on for way too long. So people in the room who've read versions of this, you'll see that it has changed. I am going to publish this damn thing one day. This is the beginning of it. It's only 2.5 pages, but it's a novel called Jubilee, and the very beginning of it is called Precambrian Supereon. I was born 3,670 years ago, or maybe only 50. My mother never told me the story of my tragic namesake, nor was it taught at Catholic school or found in the readings at Sunday Mass. I was 17 when I first heard my name on an evangelical talk radio show. The Dinah incident, they called it. I had to go look it up. My mother was pretty sick by the time I was 17. Otherwise, I would have asked her if she knew about Dinah and her brothers. Didn't my mother read the Bible? It wouldn't be until after she died that I started to see my life tangled up in that old story of fathers and sons and wives and the daughter whose name I shared. A story that smells like a dart game I'd lost against my older brothers. A rotting fish dropped by a seagull. Smoke from a burn barrel. Like me, my mother was born into a family with a storytelling mother. Once upon a time, my mother made sense out of all of the confusing pieces, from our family tree rooted on the Mediterranean west of Rome, to my father's ancestors who'd emigrated across the Atlantic, to the magical grandmother who drifted down from the Italian Alps. When I was 10, we moved to the United States. The American grandfather I met in Maryland told different stories, but by then I knew all my mothers by heart. From when I was born, I'd hung on to her every word. But I'm no storyteller. I like to hide. When I was a little girl, I loved hiding under the table in our fourth-floor apartment in Civitavecchia, where my mother and her 3 sisters, who all lived on lower floors of the building, would sit. After they cleared the midday meal and washed dishes, they would return to the table, my mother peeling oranges with a paring knife. Zia Lucetta, the second oldest and my mother's favorite, would crack walnuts with her back teeth. Zia Palmira, the plumpest, would lean back and laugh so hard she'd almost tip over her chair. My youngest aunt, Raquel, the only unmarried sister, would stare out the window overlooking Via Matteotti, where seagulls whirled against the backdrop of the blue sea as my mother told true stories, funny stories, cautionary stories, family legends. My favorites were the magic tales that my grandmother had brought down from the north, from the Dolomites, mountains that sounded so sad and strong. Sometimes my mother would peek under the table and see me sitting there. Adina, she would say, waving her paring knife at me, sei una ragazza brava o cattiva? Are you a good girl or a bad girl? At 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, I always said brava, good. My basket felt a little heavy down at the market, my mother might say. What did you sneak inside? Did the butcher see? I would climb into her lap, and Palmira would laugh and cross herself. Mama would start the story of the basket of cherries and the fat butcher, or the ducks that talked, or the stone of gold, the gourd of blood, cats under the sea. Our Tyrrhenian is an unpredictable sea, Mama would say, her orange peel coming off in a long spiral. The Balenotara and the Capodolio, they capsize boats. My father would appear in the room sometimes, interrupting in his pidgin Italian. No, the whales aren't the danger. He'd try to be a part of things, but he'd take over, as if he were the authority, instead of a cousin who'd arrived from America, knocking at the sister's door when he was 18, because his parents had sent him to Italy to avoid the draft. It's the wind, he'd say. He'd wink at my Aunt Raquel, whose fear of drowning was a joke everyone knew. The wind knocks over the boats. The Scirocco can take you right under. My mother would laugh at my father, not unkindly. Then, her face a brick, she'd say, that's right, amore mio. Our Tirreno is not for beginners. The wind comes up from the Sahara. All that hot air, nothing sailors can do to escape. In those days before we abandoned Italy, following my father back across the Atlantic to start over in Havre de Grace, Maryland, I believed every word she said. Sailing through the marketplace from booth to booth, Mama would catch up lemons, tomatoes, and zucchini blossoms like a fisherwoman. She'd lower a basket from our fourth-floor apartment, conscripting my brothers to send up fresh ciabatta and rosette and cornetti. She'd dry her nightgowns on the roof, and I'd climb out there with her, commanding the layers of our old city. Mama told stories that seemed to be about one thing and then turned into another. I believed her all the way up until I realized I didn't like the very old story I'd been born into. I'm not sure Mama liked it much herself, even though she told it without complaining, as if she never thought to imagine it any other way. And by then, it was too late to ask her, because she was dead. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I'm going to attempt to show some slides. There we go. So my name's Glen Retief. I teach mostly creative nonfiction here. It's wonderful to see you all. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I'm going to be reading from some literary journalism that I published in Daily Maverick, a South African newspaper. I'm originally from South Africa. So you might hear a few South African words. I don't think it's going to matter, but it is written for a South African audience. And it is called An Indian Boarding School Reopens, an Old Ache. It is about a visit I made to the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, which was the first off-reservation Indian boarding school in North America. It served as the template for many hundreds more that were focused on separating or cleansing Native Americans of their home cultures. I began my visit at the Cumberland County Historical Society on a leafy street in the quaint 300-year-old center of Carlisle. I went there to buy a copy of their booklet entitled Walking Tour of Grounds of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, the only such guidebook currently in print. It was on something of a whim that after my purchase, I took the elevator up the second floor to view their small museum. There, amidst the displays of folk art wood carvings and antique clocks, to my surprise, I found an entire room dedicated to the industrial school, with information about its accomplishments in sports, music, and vocational training. But it was the wall-sized picture that caught my attention. Here I also got my first clue that this exploration was going to be less a dispassionate intellectual journey than an emotionally charged confrontation with my South African past. Looking out at me was a sea of several hundred faces, indigenous children, all in the woolen, button-down uniforms of the Carlisle School. Some certainly looked happy, say the debonair boy with a tuft toward the back middle of the crowd. But then there were the majority, the young girl with frizzy hair. Lost my place. Okay, this is going to be tricky. The young girl with frizzy hair apparently on the verge of tears. The young boy so numbed out, he seemed on the verge of falling asleep. And then, most horrifying of all, a second young boy staring into the camera, shaved head, wide-eyed, his face communicating what exactly? A vast, almost incomprehensible loneliness, the trauma of being torn away from those who loved him. I had my own brush with boarding school suffering from ages 12 to 17, a much shallower wound than those of the children I was now looking at, but enough to reopen an old ache in my chest and to leave me uncontrollably weeping at this vision of mass mistreatment of children. Luckily, I had the museum to myself, and I could cry away beneath the display cases of moccasins and athletics trophies and the photograph of legendary Carlisle football player Jim Thorpe kicking up at a near vertical angle. My parents lived in Susquehanna village in the Kruger National Park. Those were the final years of apartheid, and the nearest white English-speaking high school was an hour and a half away in Nelspruit. So every Monday and Friday, I climbed on a green and white bus for the trip down the R40 to or from Lowveld High Hostel with its tall brick buildings and wire fences. To me, it was a nightmare. Older boys were responsible for maintaining discipline in the passages, and they did so by administering daily beatings with cricket bats. Somehow they pegged me correctly as gay, and so they subjected me to a special range of humiliating initiations designed to cure me of my effeminacy, thrashings with pillow slips filled with athletic spikes, baking summer afternoons, confined to bed under piles of blankets and surrounded with electric heaters. I had no idea what steamroller of hatred had hit me. In the early mornings, I climbed to the top story of the East Classroom building and looked towards my parents' home, fantasizing about the angels who might grab me if I jumped and ferry me home across koppies and savannas. Carlisle Indian Industrial School was famous, too, for its violent punishments. When children spoke their own languages, teachers washed their mouths out with lye soap. Teachers caned boys and girls for mistakes on tests or for forgetting their homework. For fun, the younger boys were made to run belt lines where they were whipped by older lads. If students snuck off the school grounds to, say, perform their cultural rituals in the woods, they were locked for days in the guardhouse with nothing to eat but bread and water. I gathered myself emotionally over lunch, then drove out to the Carlisle barracks. It's a return to an army barracks today. Drove out to the Carlisle barracks, where I followed signs to the office where visitors undergo a background check before receiving a pass to visit the monument. Lucky for me, I'm a dual citizen of South Africa and the US. Later that weekend, at an academic conference focused on the legacy of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, I would meet an Italian museum curator who was denied entry because the office was unable to complete an FBI background search. But after getting my clearance in 5 quick minutes, the guard at the gate waved me right into a miniature fenced-off suburb with the commissary, human resources building, athletic stadium, hospital, and the US Army War College. Presidential proclamation of the historical marker, be damned, I could not see a single sign to the historical monument. Nor was the map on the inner back cover of the Historical Society booklet much help. It simply showed the army base as a giant featureless semi-rectangle with the old school grounds protruding from the bottom left. After driving around for a few minutes, I parked in a visitor's bay and decided to ask for directions. But then I ran into what I struggle in hindsight to see as anything other than the great American habit of historical erasure. I asked first a young man in uniform carrying a book satchel, then a blond middle-aged man cleaning his car, and finally an elderly fellow mowing the football fields. No clue, said the student, even when I showed him the booklet with the pictures of the old boarding school building still standing. Never heard of it, said the car washer. The lawnmower just shook his head. Laboriously, I oriented myself with the map. Then at last I was in luck. Outside the post office, a soldier said, just keep going down this road until you hit the guardhouse. And once I found the old school, the booklet came into its own. There are 14 buildings still standing out of an original 32, all of them now repurposed. The old hospital has become an army hotel. The teachers' quarters have become flats for junior officers. Only the sports center with a display honoring Jim Thorpe remains a gymnasium. And now, again to my surprise, I found something oddly familiar, even comforting in the buildings themselves. There, right on the edge of the base, stood the coach's house, looking cute and inviting, with its white siding and Greek revivalist porch pillars. In later years at Lowveld High, I got invited into teachers' homes like these with my friends. I remembered the vice principal having me over for supper, the hostel head teacher inviting me to watch P.W. Botha's Rubicon speech in his living room, and saying after it, God knows what happens to us now. Likewise, viewing that Carlisle School's old music center, I remembered practicing at Lowveld High for a cameo appearance in Strauss's Die Fledermaus. In one scene, I accidentally kicked a beach ball off stage into the audience, and someone batted it right back to me. Music, like literature, was a corner of that community where I could be myself. Was that true, too, for members of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School Band, which performed at presidential inaugurations? More importantly, did some of the devastated-looking kids from the photographs eventually find a measure of peace, even in this place of cultural genocide? Did they eventually return home to build fires in their southwestern kivas or dance for the green corn harvest in the Appalachian Mountains? I finished the tour and returned to my car. There I plugged the address of my hotel into Google Maps. 1 block forward, 1 right turn, and I'd left the army base by a back route, no papers or checks in the outgoing direction. When we snuck out at boarding school, we always had to climb out of a window, then down a fire escape, and through a hole in the fence. The 20-minute walk to the Nelspruit restaurants was both exhilarating and terrifying, the latter because of the beatings that would come our way if someone saw us. If you want to see me well and strong again, wrote Luzina Swaney to her mother, a Cherokee living more than a day's train ride away in North Carolina, quote, you will have to help get me away from here, end quote. But for many Carlisle students, home was unreachable, half a continent away. In addition to the cultural assimilation, the US government appreciated the leverage boarding schools gave the government over adult native communities. After all, no Apache warriors or Choctaw protesters were going to oppose the federal government too vigorously with their children held hostage in Carlisle's dormitories. As a result, boarding school officials discouraged trips home, even over long summer breaks. When the founder of the school, Richard Henry Pratt, died in 1944, he was buried in the Arlington National Cemetery alongside presidents and generals. By contrast, the approximately 180 children who died at Carlisle Indian Industrial School of tuberculosis, influenza, homesickness, and suicide were buried on site. Today, their graves line Claremont Road. Commuters drive past them to the skyscrapers of nearby Harrisburg. Many of their names are misspelled. All the graves are adorned with crosses, whether or not the children they commemorate worshipped their conquerors' gods. These children, at least, never recovered. They never got to go home to heal, grow, or reclaim their cultures. I imagined them lying close to death in that hospital that is now a hotel. I pictured them praying in Cherokee, Navajo, or Ojibwe to the Great Spirit. Please, get me out of here. Please send me an ancestor to lift me up and take me home. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karla Kelsey, and I'm the last reader for the night. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to my colleagues for your intelligence, veracity, talent, and kindness. All of you. I have one poem. It's in 6 parts. The title is 6 Cut Flowers for the Self-Replicating Machine. 1. When you claim to have no time for falling ill, I understand you no longer inhabit your body, as if you could do without dew claw, communal pads, foot pads, claws. In contrast, when Dostoevsky enters the Crystal Palace, he doesn't exult but composes an essay on shattering. His shabby velvet coat is described without comment. There are wire hangers fashioned into a corset. Meanwhile, when I talk about ideological theater, you imagine flirtery, upholstered seats, a tasseled curtain swinging open on command. 2. List of films shown from an automated projection booth. Myth of the burning piano. There's a white silk tassel, etc. Repetition for the sake of repetition. The recording of a burning piano. 3. There's scant proof of an all-knowing entity, yet I continue holding history in my spine, small horns cascading down my back. The capacity for differentiating hunger from tension in the jaw is contingent upon the ability to cultivate both posture and breath. Irises, then lilies. We begin on the count of 4 and rarely think ahead. The last gift was your hand in my hand. The penultimate was the burning piano and unclassifiable kiss, its stone the color of the museum's Fortuny dress, scarab with gold threads webbing wrists and neck. Meanwhile, the serrated aperture. 4. If each sentence describes an arrow, are the spaces between destinations, static, or something other? When I land, I eavesdrop in Russian, but decline to listen in otherwise. Her orchid pink dress, paired with ankle boots top-stitched with flames, fitted at the calf, articulates collapse more than my orchid perfume. Suede, held to the cheek. What seeds cities after the caravan departs? On my person, I have no less than 3 devices for calculating time, but only yesterday did I understand the measures required by the oak flourishing past its prime. The mind's trained to create space as lungs butterfly closed. 5. Did this ongoing grief of you impoverish or thicken when I began to approach the fact of my own death? Perhaps win is the wrong term, wrong hinge for something more ever-present than even the jade knot, clutched for its ability to externalize defamiliarized energies more discreetly than the recording of the piano dragged to the meadow and set to burn. Featuring bouquets of peonies and peacock feathers, this chintz, neither dainty nor demure, is inappropriate for curtains and morning dress. As the image dissolves, the sense of self, too, dissolves, regardless of whether we bar artificial general intelligence from ontological wonderment. 6. The wedding china's ferturial reach is expressed by the high percentage of bone ash, 50% procured from cattle markets and slaughterhouses neighboring the factory in London's East End. More than a frame separates ritual sacrifice from commercial production, for the altar is buried in the garage that divides my attention between my lover and my mother. Blue and red chrysanthemums punctuate and garland, haloed by a gilded rim. Between this and the favored silhouette rests all manner of subjugation. The double-petaled peony signifies too much to exhume. It was nearly impossible to hear me under the discordant playing, piano detuned. Thank you.
Okay, I'll finish quickly by thanking you again all for being here. It's going to be a great semester. Come back 2 weeks from now to hear Professor Lawrence Roth read from his book, which is a combination of personal narrative and critical analysis. It's called Unpacking My Father's Bookstore. So see you in 2 weeks. Bring your friends. Let's pack this place. Okay, take care. Thank you.